By my clock, it is about that time. Welcome, everyone. My name is Celine Figueroa, and I will be your host for this date night. It's going to be a fun one. I am a program specialist at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, and tonight we are excited to bring you Reality Bytes. We've got a really cool program today. We have Dr. Vince Paturo from MSU Denver. We've got Vince Morris, who's an educator performer from the Museum of Nature and Science. We have Ian Holtman. I'm so sorry, Ian, your name got lost in my little list. I'll put us in gallery view for a second so we can say hello, and then we'll go ahead and share the PowerPoint and get started with tonight's program. So in case you haven't already, you did get your cocktail card. That's the word I was looking for. Your cocktail card in your email for tonight. So let us know in the comments what you're sipping on tonight. Are you sipping on the Green Fairy? And we're so excited for tonight's program. In the true spirit of 2020, we will be talking about how we kind of ended up on this timeline. Not something we all expected, but not the best timeline, but here we all are. So like I said, that's our signature cocktail for tonight. Here's a little preview of everything that we've got going on. If you all stay long enough, it might go just a little bit over, but we do have a preview of the fantasy spaceship from Space Odyssey, and that's going to be super cool. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Dr. Vincent Paturo, who's going to talk to us about depictions of simulated realities on the big screen. Dr. Paturo.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay, Celine? All right, great. Well, hello, everybody. Dr. Vince Paturo, like Celine said, from MSU Denver. If you don't know me, if you haven't seen me before, I host the science fiction film series every summer in conjunction with the museum and the C Film Center. We did a shortened one this year. It was online, it was virtual. But we're hoping that next July and August, we can be back in the theaters for, it was actually our 10th anniversary this past year. So we're just going to celebrate our 11th anniversary next year. And so hopefully you can join us for some of those. But thanks for having me tonight. Just wanted to talk about some of the films that are about alternate realities. It was sort of a big theme in the late 90s, this idea that reality was fake, or the possibility that reality is a hoax. And several films came out right about the same time. There was The Truman Show, The 13th Floor, Dark City, which is a really great film if you haven't seen that one. We did that at the Sci-Fi series a couple years ago, I think. And then, of course, the one that sort of put it all together and the one that caught everybody's attention really was The Matrix. This idea that all of reality is a hoax. And the Matrix was based a lot on the philosophy of Baudrillard. In fact, in the movie, Neo is holding a copy of the books, Simulacra and Simulacron. And that's where he hides all his hijacked tapes or whatever he was doing there. Whatever he's doing is hacking on. But the philosophy of Baudrillard was sort of interesting, where he talked about two terms. Simulacra is a copy of which there is no original. So he used the example of Disney World. So if you go to Disney World and you walk down Main Street, when you first get into Disney World or Disneyland, it's based on something that never really existed. There's no Main Street like that in the world. It's based on an idea. And that's what he called simulacra. Simulation, he said, was the process in which the difference between original and copy has collapsed. And that's the stage of simulation. The difference between original and copy has collapsed. And the thing about the Matrix, though, is there's a world you can go back to in the Matrix. And Baudrillard said you can't really do that. you can't really go back to that world that was there before. It's changed, or it doesn't exist anymore. And you know, Baudrillard was talking a lot about capitalism, and you know, Baudrillard said that we're all metaphorical batteries plugged into the capitalist system. But I was thinking about this in terms of the world we're living in right now, because I feel like to a certain extent in this pandemic that we all sort of unplugged from this world that we were living in. I think about it, right? Driving and work and, you know, movie theaters and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In some ways, that was like we were plugged in, we were in the matrix, we were living that life. And we kind of unplugged from that. We came out of that. And that's where we are now. That's what we're doing now. The interesting part about that for me, though, and here's a question I would like to pose. And you could you know, answer this in the chat or give your ideas in the chat or ask your own question. But what's the world that we're going back to now? Where do we go once we re-enter society? And I would sort of love to hear, you know, your thoughts on that. In the Matrix, there was a savior, somebody that, you know, came in and was able to unplug us everybody, and so we can re-enter the world. Do we have a savior? Is somebody going to lead us back to that world? And what's it going to look like when we get back there? So yeah, I think Celine posted comment. What do you all think? You could also, if you have comments or questions about those movies too, if anybody's seen the Truman Show, the 13th Floor, Dark City, or The Matrix, in every one of those, there's this idea that we're sort of being controlled. We're being controlled by something else. And the reality which we live in is out of our control. That's the alternate reality. And the key is, in all these movies, is try to get back to that real, right? So is there real?
We do have a great comment from Ashley, who says that there is no normal. It would be great if we could enter a post-COVID world that is more socially just. And then that Ashley does not want to return to a world that subjugates citizens.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great point, Ashley. And, you know, the thing about the Matrix is everything, you know, sort of turns out nicely, neatly, right? And well, not neatly, but, you know, we can go back, right? Go back to this world, but right. Do we want to go back to the world that, you know, we had before? Can we change it? I don't know. I'm not Neo. Sometimes I do see like little green lines going up and down when I put on my really cool sunglasses. But I'm definitely not Neo. Can I tell a joke, Celine? You were talking about jokes. Can I tell one joke?
Please, absolutely.
Okay. All right, so I want to see your face with this one because this is a bit of a reaction joke. Penguin walks into a bar, says to the bartender, "Have you seen my brother?" And the bartender says, "What does he look like?" You got it now? Some ways this is the best medium to tell this joke because it takes a minute for people to get that one. Somebody said Being John Malkovich. Yeah, Being John Malkovich is another one of those films that makes us question the reality. Although in Being John Malkovich, there's really no sort of overarching thing or person or group that's kind of keeping us in that matrix or in that reality. There's always a sense of the real. There's always a sense of the normal. And I don't know, like Ashley said, if we have a normal, you know, if we have something to go back to, you know, do we have a Zion? You know, Zion's the reference to the Matrix. I think about my time's up, unless there's any other questions or any other comments, but if not, thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks for sitting through the penguin joke. My kids hate that joke, but it's one of my favorites.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Paturo. We were talking about whether to call you Dr. Paturo or Vincent earlier. I think after that joke, I'm comfortable with calling you Vincent. But if you all have, Dr. Paturo is going to stick around and can answer any questions that you have about various realities, specifically the Matrix, or really anything. He's a great person to ask all of your philosophical questions to. It's my favorite thing to do when we're in a program together. And we already have a question that you can hop on to answer in the chat, Dr. Paturo. That is, what do you think our new reality will look like? Well, I will tell you what our shared reality will look like. I'm about to share a really cool video. So this video is from our educator performer. His name is Vince Morris. He's super duper cool. He also happens to know a lot about gems and minerals. And again, he's just a very knowledgeable guy. So what he has is a proscope, which is basically a giant microscope that televises whatever it is that you're examining into a larger screen. And he's going to show us a different perspective, so a different form of reality that we don't always get to see with just our bare eyes. So I'll go ahead and play the segment.
Hi, I'm Vince, and welcome to Exploring Minerals. We're going to be using our proscope here. It's going to allow our point of view to become magnified anywhere from 10 to 200 times our normal point of view, allowing us to learn and kind of see a whole new world of minerals. One of my favorite minerals to start off with is malachite, and it truly allows us to see the whole new world of minerals by magnifying its small potential. There we go. So you can see here our big old azurite crystals, and scattered in here are these small, tiny, kind of bladed, kind of snowball malachite crystals here. And they are best buddies. They grow together all the time. And because they are carbon minerals, our malachite takes on a green very similar to that of the Statue of Liberty, since she is also made out of copper. Now we can use these striations to help identify what the mineral is, but we can also use other aspects of minerals to help identify. And one of that is simply knowing what it's made out of, a defined chemical composition, such as quartz. Normally when we see quartz, this is typically what you think as a mineral or a gem is. This is just a standard quartz crystal. Now, having impurities inside the quartz, while it does have a defined chemical composition, it is allowed to have a range of impurities, allowing it to have purple, such as this amethyst here. Now, this is still quartz. It's just a variety of quartz, turning this impurity of iron into the beautiful purple. Or if we have impurities such as anything that's radioactive, that could turn our quartz into something that's very black and smoky. Or if we had others such as calcium in our quartz, that would make it look a little bit orangey, such as citrine. Now, what's really unique about quartz is that its base structure is this atom right here. One silicon for every, and with 4 oxygens circled around it. Its base structure is SiO2, but as we exert mechanical pressure energy onto the structure, it is able to produce electrical energy as well, and vice versa. If we hook up a car battery to this, it would possibly expand. So converting that electrical energy into mechanical energy. This is why we see quartz in our clocks from school to here at the Denver Museum. This characteristic is called piezoelectricity. Now, another key factor of defining what a mineral is that it must be inorganic, not coming from a living organism. Something like our dinosaur bones coming from possibly a fragment of Triceratops, while it is organic and replaced with minerals, it was made by a living being, so won't be considered a mineral. Animals can create their own shells and creating their own minerals. This is something called biomineralification, and that is a unique process that we can see in snails and other animals like even ammonites, ancient creatures. Now, another thing that we must use to define what a mineral is that it must have a solid structure to it. Now, something like our galena here is a lead mineral. It is a 1-to-1 ratio of lead and sulfur, making it extremely dense. But because of that, it is very solid here on Earth at room temperature, so we consider it a mineral. Meanwhile, if we go on to another planet such as Mars, where the temperatures can be extremely cold, we can consider water being a mineral on that planet. Meanwhile, here on Earth, it is not solid at normal temperatures. It's usually found to be liquid. So we would not consider it to be a mineral. Now, another cool thing about minerals is that they have a crystalline structure. And we kind of saw that when we zoomed in there with malachite and azurite, but we can definitely see it here on our rhodochrosite crystal. Now, back in the good old days of our silver and gold rush, rhodochrosite was considered a trash mineral. It was hauled off in train cars, essentially, off the mountains. Nowadays, it's worth a pretty penny to collectors. And because of this brilliant red color, but if we look closely, we can see these cleavage planes going right through our rhodochrosite here. So these cleavage planes allow the mineral to be cleaved. Essentially, cut down one direction of the mineral, one side of it, to allow it to be cut into many pieces of itself. This can be seen here in our calcite. Our calcite is essentially has one big old cleavage plane right there. So if I took a hammer, I could easily cleave down this plane and make another calcite crystal. Now, the unique property about calcite is it has an optical property, allowing it to refract light or slow down beams of light, making them look like a double vision or like going cross-eyed almost. And that's one of the real cool properties of calcite. Now, not to be confused with diffraction, which is what Isaac Newton did, Pink Floyd, whichever one, but this is refraction, the slowing down of light as it passes through our mineral. Now, also, our mineral must have, as I said, a crystalline structure. Glass will not have an ordered structure. Things that we see like in our cars or our home windows are random, especially our volcanic glass. Our volcanic glass comes out of our volcano at such a high rate and cools down so quickly that the crystals inside, the atoms inside, have no time to order themselves, but only do it randomly. And that's why we consider glass not to be a mineral, but just kind of a pseudo mineral, but just a glass. Now, it also has to be naturally occurring. No man-made stuff here to be considered a mineral. But we can have things that were grandfathered in, like mercury, which is we find to be liquid at room temperature here sometimes, but because it was discovered so far back when medieval people would rub it on their skin to give them nice rosy cheeks during the plague. But we can find even minerals like bismuth here. Now, bismuth is a very heavy element, and it's only found at about twice the frequency of gold. But we can replicate it, we can cause it to crystallize in the lab, but these crystals would not be ever found in nature, but they are amazing to look at. We can see this angle here between the corners, this rhombohedral angle, and this is because bismuth has that crystalline structure of rhombohedral all the way down to its cell unit, all the way down to its base building block, essentially. But all these beautiful colors here, essentially, bismuth was also used as a makeup in the older days as well, a whiter color to our cinnabar, our mercury. But I would say overall, my favorite mineral here would be our rhodochrosite, our good old state mineral. Unfortunately, our state mineral is not hard enough and dissolves a little bit too easily to be considered a gemstone. So it's just a nice collector's piece to have in your house, but it's beautiful all around. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed exploring minerals with me here with Reality Bytes, but I will see you guys next time here at the Denver Museum.
Thank you so much to Vince for that gem of a video. I know I learned a lot. I think the presentation was crystal clear. I know. I'm gushing over how much Vince rocks. Okay, I'm done. So next up, we have the museum's own Ian Holton. So Ian is the manager of creative technology, and he's got a really neat presentation called In Our Own Image. Ian, I will let you do a more formal introduction, but thank you so much for being with us.
Great. Thank you, Celine, and thank you for those wonderful jokes. That was hard to beat. My name is Ian Holton, and as Celine mentioned, I lead the creative technology team at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. And one of the fun parts of that job is that I get to look for emerging technologies, to look for trends that change how we engage, inspire, interact with our visitors, and things that we might change how we do business. And one of those technological changes that I've come across, and I'm excited to share with you, is what we call machine learning. And essentially, we're teaching machines to think the way that we do. I expect this change will be something that impacts every aspect of our lives and will fundamentally change our reality. I'm going to stop my video here for just a second so that the presentation will play a little more smoothly. But if you guys have any questions, or I'm going to be asking you for some feedback, feel free to just add it to the chat, and I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on some of these. So when I say that we're teaching machines to think the way we do, that's kind of a big statement. So let's take a minute to kind of think about, what does that mean? In 1882, Charles Babbage invented what we call the BABBAGE engine. And at that time, it was a gear-operated calculating machine. You can imagine what a fundamental shift that would be, to be able to solve mathematical problems simply by turning a crank. Now, this machine could figure things out to about three places, so up to 1,000 digits, or up to 1,000, pardon me. And it did so through gears and levers. Interestingly enough, it was about 52 years before the spork was invented. So the march of technology wasn't exactly a forward progress all the time. It's almost 200 years ago. And since then, computers have come quite a long way. Now, whether we look at vacuum tubes or the first transistors that showed up in 1950, to the fact that our modern transistors, or our modern chips, have over 8 billion transistors on the chip, I mean, that progression is massive and pretty impressive. But in that entire time, computers have essentially served the exact same purpose. They are calculating machines that do exactly what we tell them to. Now, that's grown quite a bit from playing music or watching videos, or it's hard to imagine our life without computers now, especially with the situation with COVID. But at the end of the day, they're just machines that execute things that we're asking them to do. All that is starting to change. The reason it's changing is because machines are learning to think. So before we get too much into what I mean when I say machines think, I'd like to ask you guys a few questions to kind of sort of explore how we think, so you can see that we're not so far apart. So let me ask you, how many of you, what color is the rim of this vase? Just pull up the chat here. Gold. I see any blue. Okay. Now, how many of you saw the two people talking in the background? Looks like George Washington having a conversation with JFK, perhaps. Okay, I see a couple of yups. How many of you see it now that I've pointed it out to you? So the important thing here, I see a couple of comments that you didn't see it until I said it. Exactly. Our minds tend to see what we expect to see. So now that you're expecting to see that white space, or the negative space there, the next time you see that vase image, you'll probably see it right away. What's changed here is nothing about the image itself. It's just changed what your mind is expecting to see. You can think of it as sort of lowering your threshold for what it takes to qualify as an image. So when we look at this cloud picture, for instance, anybody see anything besides just a cloud? Okay, I see a couple of things for a heart. Excellent. How about this image? What do you guys see? So what's happened here is that there's a shift in our minds where we're capable of seeing both a galaxy or a cloud, and also an eye and a heart, and possibly other animals in the clouds. And there's this uniquely human trait where we can look at something and see it both for what it is, but also for all the things that it could be, simply by lowering our threshold for what qualifies as a heart or an eye. Right? It's close enough to be a heart, so yeah, I could kind of see where that would work. Let me ask you guys one more. Anybody recognize this logo? You guys see the smiley face? Very good. Yep, Goodwill. All right. So now when you look at it, I want you to look at the G in the front of the Goodwill. Okay. Nothing obviously has changed from that logo. It's still a smiley face. But now that we have some context, we've seen the rest of the word, you can see it as a G. So what's important about this example is you've noticed two things about how humans interpret the world. One, we have this threshold of what will qualify to be a G, right? It's close enough. And we have some context to kind of reassert our perception that, yeah, I think it's probably a G. So threshold and context help us make sense of the world. And this is one of the fundamental things that really impacts how we see things. So this picture is one of my favorite paintings. It's by Leroy Neiman. The reason I like it and the reason it's included here is when you first look at it, it is a chaotic mess, right? But because we can look at it and say, well, it kind of looks like a sailboat. I could see that. And I think there's maybe another sailboat, and it definitely looks like maybe there's some water. Suddenly, because we have context and a lower threshold, there's a whole story that's being told just by this picture. And I love that humans can look at that and see it both as beautiful and as a story. That trait's not uniquely human. We're teaching machines to do the same thing. And when you can change the way that you look at things, the things you look at change. So what I mean by that is when we teach computers to recognize the world around them and to see it within context, to see what it means and not just what this one picture is, but how it fits in the rest of the scene, the types of things we can ask computers to do fundamentally changes. So let's talk about context and threshold in computer vision. I'm going to dive a little bit into some of the technical side here, but it's going to be pretty quick. So if you guys have questions about this afterwards, let me know. When a computer looks at the world, or actually when a computer wants to show anything in the world, whether it's your cell phone or your laptop, it uses pixels. When we analyze computer images, we do the same thing. So pixels are essentially the little dots that make up your screen. And if we were to look at this example on the left, sometimes those pixels are all by themselves. Sometimes there's pixels next to them. All we can really tell by looking at this is the relationship of one pixel to the next one. If you kind of squint your eyes, you start to see circles and vertical lines, horizontal lines. Those low-level features can be combined. So now if you have a couple of vertical lines in the right order, maybe it could be an eye, maybe it could be a nose. If you have enough of those in the right position, maybe that could be a face, right? So you start with this very simple building block of a threshold, and then you apply more context to it. And that's how you're able to define computer vision, essentially. And it gets even better. Say you step back and add a little bit more threshold to that face that you found. So for instance, are the eyebrows close to the eyes? What's the angle of the eyebrow? Is the person's mouth in a particular shape? And from that, we can start to deduce what sort of mood is this person in? How smart are they? Or how old are they? What gender are they? I've included a link here, and I'll pass this around at the end too, if you guys want, to Azure's cognitive services, which will let you upload any image you want, and it will tell you your approximate age, your mood. We're using this for faces, but the same thing works for sound. It works for any processing where context is important. Let me show you guys one more. This is called Rorschach test. You're probably familiar with it. What do you guys see in this picture? There's an interesting test that said that computers shouldn't be able to interpret this, right? That being able to make sense of a random image like this is uniquely human. I see butterfly, bat. Exactly. You guys are doing exactly what people are designed to do. Where we look at it, we see all the things that it could be by lowering the threshold for what would qualify as a butterfly and a bat. And behind the scenes, what's happening in your mind is you're weighing that balance of it's close enough to be a bat, and it has to be practically perfect in every way. And somewhere in the middle is accuracy, right? If you're too open to anything or too restrictive, you won't be able to make sense of the world around you. AIs have the same problem. So the same AI that I just showed you that was doing facial recognition has to be tuned. The example I'm going to show you here is from an experiment by Google called Deep Dream. I'm going to play this and just sort of speak over it so that you guys can kind of see what we're looking at. In this case, this generative network was designed to see dogs. And the problem is that its threshold for what qualified as a dog was set far too low. So everything it saw looks like a dog. It's a really interesting video if you have some time to watch the whole thing. But it raises some interesting questions about what happens when we hallucinate. What does it mean when that threshold is either too loose or too restrictive? All right. So now that we've kind of hammered home this concept of variable thresholds, this is possibly the most important slide of the presentation. This is the mathematical representation of what we call a digital neuron. But what it's really saying here is that if you have W, which are the things we care about, so different items we're looking at, and you apply a threshold to them, by adjusting how much of that threshold, you can figure out how much do we care about this and how much variance is tolerable, okay? So for instance, if we link back to our pixels, how many pixels have to be next to each other to form a vertical line? What is that threshold before we're willing to confidently declare, where the computer can say, I think with confidence that is an eye or a face or a. Now you'll notice that the digital neuron looks a little bit like a real neuron. And I want to take for a minute to think about how we as people learn. Take, for instance, you're trying to learn to play the violin and you play a note and it's not quite right, it's a little too low. So you adjust your technique and you play again, it's too high. You try again, and after a bunch of practice, you get just right, and then you repeat and repeat and repeat until you have defined that is the technique and the pattern that gives you the best results. Neural networks work the same way. Essentially what we do is we train them with a set of data that this is the desired outcome, and then we let them guess and get it wrong, and guess and get it wrong, until they guess and get it right. And each time they do that, they're adjusting that threshold until they learn to see whatever it is that we're looking for, and they get better and better at it. Now, there's a couple of different structures for neural networks, and we could spend a lot of time going through here. They're each fascinating and good at different things. But perhaps the most recognizable is this idea of a recursive neural network, which is kind of what we were just talking about. I see a question about Uncanny Valley. We'll get to that. You're right on it. The recursive neural network is the same thing we do when we practice. So when you think about how you spent most of your early lives, maybe the first 1 or 2 years of your life, just listening to people talking, looking at faces, reaffirming and reasserting, what's positive feedback, what's correct, what's wrong. We're doing that same thing. We're just practicing and learning and practicing and learning. So in the case of a neural network, we feed them thousands of pictures of people, if we're training to look at a face, and we let it start to pick out what are the similarities. What is it that makes a face look correct? And what is it that makes a face look incorrect? Now, it used to be we would have to tell it exactly what to look for. But with neural networks, we can let the machine learn. We don't have to tell it, this is what makes a face. We just tell it, oh, hey, you got that one right. And that ability to interpret your environment is a phenomenal shift. So let's see how you guys do compared to a computer. Is this picture of a face real or fake? Okay, I see a couple of fakes. Give you guys one more minute here to enter in your. All right, seems like everybody's pretty, we have consensus. This is a fake image. Let's try another one. Real or fake? Okay. Another one. We have 2 more here. All right, and last one. So how did you guys know that they were real or fake? And how do you think you did? The truth is, they were all fake. They're all computer generated. One of the things you pointed out, I see asymmetrical in there. You're right, part of what makes us look human is our imperfections. And there was a question that came up earlier about Uncanny Valley. This is the graph we're looking at right now. So there's this concept, you'll see a lot in Disney movies, where if something looks remotely human, we're willing to empathize with it. The stick person, the Simpsons, Snow White. But as it starts to get more and more real, we cross this threshold where all we notice are the things that are not right. That first image we saw was pretty easy to spot that just didn't quite seem normal. And that's what we call the Uncanny Valley. It's a dip in our perception. It's been typically very difficult to cross that. That's why you can spot really bad CG very easily in movies. But with AI and that continual process, we've crossed that threshold. It's almost indistinguishable, the real from the fake. If you guys want to see some more of these, there's a link called Generated Photos. These are essentially all exactly Polar Express.
When the sun dips below.
Let me stop that for just a second. There is a link called Generated Photos, where all of the models on that site are artificially generated. If you're looking for royalty-free stock photos of people and you don't want to have to actually pay a model, they will generate any sort of model you want of any race, gender, age. You just tell it the parameters and they're indistinguishable. That's actually where those images came from. So it doesn't just have to apply to static images. This is a technique
when the sun
called deepfakes.
Below the horizon,
I'll let him speak for a second because he's way more interesting than I am. That way you can see what's happening.
And the trees lose their leaves and stand naked.
But in this technique, we map a digital face.
When the birds wing it south for the winter, at least that's where they seem to head, then our thoughts tend to drift toward Christmas with a mixture.
We'll let him jump to one more character here.
December compresses.
This video is about
Gets
5 or
shorter.
6 minutes long, and it's definitely
Feels
worth
like
watching.
a month lasts a week.
He moves through 5 or
And
6
a
different
hectic
impressions.
commotion arises.
Perfect.
Till our sanity plays hide and seek. The colorful, bright decorations, the music.
So it raises the question of what happens when your favorite movies can be replaced with your favorite actors. I almost posted a video here, had I known what the previous presentation was, of The Matrix with Will Smith. You can imagine you have a movie you like, you'd rather start someone else. It's now something we could pretty easily do. Now, all this is interesting, but to this point, we've just been replacing real people with other real people, which brings us to stylized GANs. Now, a GAN is short for a generative adversarial network. So remember how we were just talking about how good computers are at spotting fake people? Imagine if we reversed that, right? And instead of just spotting fake people, we tried to make fake people. But then how do we know if they're any good? Well, we put those two AIs together. So one makes a fake person, and the other neural network looks at it and says, not quite, try again, not quite, try again. And pretty soon they become indistinguishable. That generative adversarial piece allows us to make fresh content. And by making it stylized, we can invent things that have never been made before. So in this case, that data set we talked about, instead of showing it real people, we started by, well, the creator started it by showing them real people, and then shifted to showing them only Disney characters. And what you're left with is an AI that will create impressions in the Disney style. It's kind of fun. I tunified my niece and nephew because they always are complaining about wanting to be a Disney princess. Now they have the chance to do so. It doesn't just have to be Disney either. This was an AI that was trained on the styles of Vincent van Gogh and then fed an image of a fox. It can now produce an art that emulates any of his styles but creates completely new work. And it doesn't just have to be digital art. Imagine ghostwriters or audio files. Kind of an interesting example. Again, if you guys have time to look at some of these links, please do so. This AI was trained in a variety of different styles. You can draw whatever you want on the left, and it will generate the art on the right in that style. If you guys want to try making one of your own, this is a sketch-assisted neural network. So on the left, you can draw whatever sketch you would like. If you're an artist or an aspiring artist like I am without any real talent, this is a great tool. It will take the drawing you've come up with and generate a face that looks as close as possible. So what does this bring us? We're at an inflection point. And what I mean by that is if you look at this red line, okay, that's essentially the course of human intellect. The reason it trends up is because we as humans have this unique ability where we can pass down the information from one generation to the next through reading and through writing and through speech. So by the time we're 18 or so, we've learned almost everything our ancestors knew and can build on that. And over time, that trajectory keeps going upwards, but it can only go up so fast. And we're limited ultimately by the capabilities of our own mind. As we cross this threshold where we can generate neural networks that are capable of inventing and creating and learning on their own, the only limitation is the size of the neural network. So the blue line represents that shift and that rapid trajectory. One of the things to take away from tonight is that thought of what happens to those people who have access to that trajectory, what happens to those people that don't. We find ourselves at this moment where we are at a spot where we can either adapt and become, incorporate some of those learnings or continue as we always have. So imagine a neural network that could interface with your own. This is some of the work being done by a company called Neuralink. Elon Musk is a big part of it, where they're essentially tapping into individual neurons and looking for patterns. If you look at the patterns on the left, those are pretty hard to interpret. Turns out that neural networks are pretty good at interpreting noise like that. So the irony here is that we'll probably end up using a neural network to make sense of our own neural network. And that pattern can be customized for each person. So the way that I think of blue, for instance, and the way that you think of blue might not necessarily be the same, but through a neural network, we can match those patterns and have a common language. We're getting close to the end, and I just want to leave you guys with a couple of thoughts. This is a quote by John F. Kennedy. The world is very different now, for man holds in his mortal hands the power to abolish all forms of human poverty and all forms of human life. The potential for networks is huge. And what I've shown you are some kind of fun examples with deep fakes and image manipulation. But this concept is much broader. It's just most easily seen through images. So imagine if a mind of unlimited potential had access to the sum total of human knowledge, what would we choose to do with it? Would we cure cancer, or would we produce more YouTube videos of kittens? On that note, I'll open it up to any questions. I think I'm pretty much at time.
Thank you so much, Ian. That was fascinating. It's a little scary to see it in real life, but we really, really appreciate that presentation. Ian's going to stick around and be on the chat for any questions that you all have. We're going to keep moving with tonight's program because it's a great transition. So thank you, Ian, for sticking around and helping answer some of these audience questions.
I appreciate it. It was a pleasure to get to be with all of you tonight.
Thank you. All right. So I do have to give a little forward before we start our next segment. The video that we're about to show is really, really cool. It's a little trippy. My interpretation of it, it's like after school special meets the green fairy drink that we introduced at the beginning of the video. So it's very much, it's a little trippy. Like that's the best word that I can come up to explain it. It is Max and Tessa, who are both educator performers at the Museum of Nature and Science, and they're expanding on this idea of what you see versus what the mind knows and giving the mind context. So it's all about optical illusions. It's a really cool video, and I will let it speak for itself. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. Feel free to comment in the chat. Let us know what you're thinking as this video is going. Again, it's really cool, but does take that priming. So again, let us know in that chat. The PowerPoint isn't working with me today. And I'll play the video.
Whatever could it be?
Hi, Tessa. What are you doing?
Hi, Max. I'm just looking at this picture. I can't figure out what it is.
Why don't you ask your friends for help?
Great idea! What do you see in the picture? Wow! Those are some great ideas, but I'm still not sure. What do you see in the picture, Max?
Oh! My friend Kenya told me about this the other day. This is an image of a Dalmatian sniffing at the ground. Now, do you see it?
Oh my goodness! It's so clear!
How about you, friends? Now, do you see the dog?
How surprising! I couldn't tell what the image was at all before you told me. And now that you've told me, the image is crystal clear.
It's a classic example of top-down processing. Before I told you what it was a picture of, you just had a bunch of random dots to try and create an image out of. But when I told you what the picture was supposed to be, suddenly your brain had a reference to all the dogs you've ever seen to fill in the details.
You know, Max, I might have another example of top-down processing.
Really?
Oh boy, yes! Here, listen to this. Do you recognize it?
No way! That wasn't a tune, that was just a random jumble of notes!
Oh, no it wasn't. What if I sing you this little song first? Yankee Doodle went to town a-riding on a pony. Do you recognize that song?
Of course!
Well, then listen to my tape again. Did you hear it? Let's listen again.
It's so clear now! The melody was just in different octaves.
Yankee Doodle went to town riding on a pony. Exactly. Top-down processing. When you didn't know what the song was, your brain didn't have enough information to piece it together. But once I sang it for you, you were able to recollect what the song was supposed to sound like and piece the melody together.
Nifty! I did not know that my ears and brain worked together like that.
It's amazing. I have other examples of auditory illusions on my tape, if you're interested.
Boy, howdy I am! But wait! What's an auditory illusion?
Great question, Max. You've probably seen an optical illusion before, like this one. Point to the hat that's the most blue.
I'd have to say that one.
Now to the hat that's the most yellow.
Well, that would have to be this one down here.
But wait. It's amazing.
Let me see that. This hat isn't blue or yellow. It's exactly half and half.
Absolutely. Only the background changed. Against a yellow background, the blue stands out. But against the blue background, the yellow stands out. These hats are actually the exact same color.
It's amazing! So that's an optical illusion, a trick of the eyes.
Right. And an auditory illusion is a trick of the ears. For example, listen to this.
The sounds as they appear to you are not only different from those that are really present, but they sometimes behave so strangely as to seem quite impossible.
That's an auditory illusion? It sounded just like a speech to me.
Well, let's listen a few more times.
But they sometimes behave so strangely. They sometimes behave so strangely. 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 So strangely. So strangely.
Oh my goodness!
So strangely.
Did you hear it, friends? Max, give it a try.
Sometimes behave so strangely. 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 The speech turned into a song.
Right. It's the speech-to-song illusion, discovered by Professor Diana Deutsch. She does a lot of research into auditory illusions and what they can tell us about our brains. Would you like to hear another?
Oh boy, howdy do I!
For those of you listening at home, you'll need headphones for this next illusion, so go get them now. Don't worry, we'll wait. I'm glad you're back. All right, headphones on. What did you hear?
I heard a high-pitched noise in my right ear and a low-pitched noise in my left ear, and they kind of alternated.
I tricked you.
You did?
Yes, I did. You see, one ear was playing high, low, while at the same time, the other ear was playing low, high, low, high.
I don't get it. This is confusing.
Well, you didn't hear both high and low in your right ear. You only heard high. And you didn't hear both high and low in your left ear. You only heard low.
Weird.
And it gets even weirder. Most right-handed people hear the high tone in their right ear and the low tone in their left ear. But for left-handed people, it's switched. What do you hear? Are you right-handed or left-handed?
Wait a second. That doesn't make any sense. You're saying that I could hear the world totally differently based on whether or not I favor my right hand or my left hand?
That's right, Max.
No. No. You're saying that me and my mom could sense the world completely differently just because I'm right-handed and she's left-handed?
That's right. Though actually, if your close family member is left-handed, you are more likely to hear the world like a left-handed person.
That doesn't make any sense!
It's all about how your brain is organized. You might know that the right side of the brain controls the left side of your body, and the left side of the brain controls the right side of your body. For this reason, in right-handed people, the planum temporale, which is associated with the speech center of the brain, is largely present on the left hemisphere of the brain. But in left-handed people, this asymmetry is much less apparent, and sometimes the planum temporale is even larger on the right side of the brain. These differences change the actual shape of your cranial cavity and can be passed through the genetic line. So yes, if your mom is left-handed, the way you hear the world may be different.
That is wild and arbitrary. Is it arbitrary?
It's actually been shown that left-handed people are more able to recover from strokes, as they've diversified their speech center across both brain hemispheres.
And you're getting all of this from whether or not I heard a high-pitched sound in my right ear or my left ear?
These auditory illusions are like breadcrumbs, leading trails into the human psyche.
Boy, howdy! This has been really incredible, and I feel like I've learned a lot. But I'm ready to be done, I think.
Shall we hear another?
No. My mind has been expanded enough for one day. Oh.
Well then, let's just go back to the singing one. You liked that one. Sometimes behave so strangely.
Sometimes behave so strangely.
Sometimes behave so strangely. Sometimes behave so strangely. Sometimes behave so strangely. Sometimes behave so strangely. Sometimes behave so strangely. So strangely. So strangely. So strangely. So strange.
In case you all were wondering, yes, I did indeed have to turn off my video and my microphone during that because I was laughing and making this face the entire time. Thank you so much, Max and Tessa. We love your mix of being both educators and performers, even if sometimes you behave so strangely. So our next part of the of tonight's program features somebody that we feature on our virtual programs a lot because she is amazing and does so much. It's space scientist Naomi Paquette. We are going to be jumping into a different reality, literally through our spaceship. So we're going to show you what a new feature in the space, the newly reimagined Space Odyssey exhibition looks like. It is really cool. For those of you that have been able or are able to see it in person, the museum is doing a lot to keep us safe. We're disinfecting frequently, and we are doing everything, including having timed reservations. They're free tickets. It just helps us keep space a little bit more managed in Space Odyssey. So I will go ahead and introduce that part of the show. And this is just a little sneak peek.
Want to escape reality? What better way than to head into the future and jump to light speed to leave this solar system behind in the all-new Space Odyssey? Engage.
So welcome to the new section of Space Odyssey. We've increased our footprint over 30%, and we're so excited to introduce you to the Fantasy Spaceship. We know from our guests and from our aerospace and scientific partners that science fiction plays a huge role in inspiring the next generation to pursue STEM. By asking what could be, people want to go and figure out how can we make this happen. So our Fantasy Spaceship is solidly grounded in science to take our guests to the next level of space exploration. We look forward to our guests exploring this space, all of its hidden Easter eggs and fun puzzles that they'll be able to find something new every time they come back and visit. And to start off our spaceship experience, we get to feel like what it would be like to be in space. We've built a sensory spacewalk where guests get the chance to feel that darkness and the quiet and the amazing world of being surrounded by stars, to really make them feel like they're in space, which was one of the most important things we heard from our community members. So welcome to the bridge of our Fantasy Spaceship. This is truly the heart of our ship. Here guests can fire laser cannons, find secret codes to control different emblems for lighting and audio, as well as be the helmsperson of the ship and actually drive it through space. So there are several different controls on our spaceship bridge. My favorite, though, is the hyperdrive. So guests have two thrusters that allow them to fly through space and these digital murals that were created. But as we actually increase the speed on the thrusters, we get closer and closer to light speed. Once we have charged up to light speed, start the hyperdrive and jump us to a new place in space.
And that's just one of many interactives all throughout our Fantasy Spaceship. Can you find all the hidden codes and discover new light shows and messages in the corridors? Or what about beat our computer at a game of Simon Says and maybe win a dance party? Blast some asteroids with the laser cannon. And of course, we can't forget about the rest of the exhibition, where we explore brand new science and amazing feats in space exploration. We investigate how do we know these facts by putting you in the role of astronaut, scientist, and explorers of the universe. You'll get to experience firsthand what it's like to participate in these amazing new feats of science. We hope you'll join us in exploring this all-new exhibit, both virtually and in person. You can learn more by visiting our website. In the words of my favorite starship captain, make it so.
Thank you again, Naomi, for that sneak peek. Like Naomi said, we would love for you all to be able to join us at the museum in person. If you're not there yet, that is okay. Naomi also did a really cool virtual tour that's available on our YouTube. I'm going to go ahead and link that in the chat right now. And that's just a walkthrough of all of Space Odyssey. I really enjoyed it. I also liked it as a precursor to visiting the exhibition. I thought it was a huge help, and it helped me find out all the little sneaky things that we could do to maximize our experience there. So that is just about what we have time for tonight. before we go, if you do want to keep the fun going, this is our last date night of 2020, which makes me really, really sad because I definitely looked forward to this over the last few months. Usually my husband is sitting right over there watching me laugh really and make bad jokes the entire time. But we do have a really cool thing that we're introducing, and it's date night box. So you're able to actually just get these shipped to your house or just pick them up at the museum at your next visit. I'm going to go ahead and link that in the chat as well. It's just a fun way of extending date night. This one has astronaut ice cream, which is amazing if you haven't had it before. It's like freeze dried. It's really cool. It's got some chemistry beer pints, Karnofsky jigsaw puzzle, which will keep you going for at least a little bit. And it has different dimensions. So it really leads into that reality bites. It lets you see different layers of it with different glasses. And then a cocktail card recipe, which will have the green fairy. So again, you can maybe even recreate that after school trippy optical illusions video that we saw today. Thank you all so much for joining us. I'm going to invite our fabulous panelists to say any last words before we end the program.
I love any show that has multiple Star Trek references.
What a great last comment from Dr. Patero. Ian, any final words?
That is hard to argue with. Live long and prosper, I think would be appropriate. So, no, thank you for the opportunity to get to share this with you guys. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.
Thank you all. And as always, these will be available on YouTube shortly after, I believe. It's usually like within a week of, so if you missed any part of this, if you came in a little bit later, had to leave any earlier, you're probably not listening to this. You're probably watching this part on YouTube. But thank you all so much for joining us. We will see you all at our next event, and hopefully we'll see you at the museum soon. Bye.